Welcome everyone to the first ever video of Sideshow Krusty Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about some good comic book movies, some bad comic book movies, and everything in between. This is going to be a tier list of every new Marvel and DC movie, TV show, or special that I watched in 2022. This list is only for live action projects, so no Super Pets, and there aren't going to be any of these CW shows on here because I didn't watch any. But the TV shows and movies that we're going to be talking about today are Peacemaker, The Batman and Black Adam from DC, Moon Knight, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Miss Marvel, Thor: Love and Thunder, She-Hulk: Attorney at Law, Werewolf by Night, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And last but not least, spoilers for the amazing tier list, Morbius. So, and after I put each one in the tiers, I'm going to be ranking them from best to worst. So let's just jump into it with Peacemaker, the first ever TV series in the DCEU, and James Gunn delivered yet again. And he was able to take this character who's kind of silly in like his theology and design, and who's really unlikable just because of his actions in the Suicide Squad, and give Peacemaker just this heartbreaking backstory and really endearing character arc. Likewise, James Gunn is just so good with ensembles, where for the third time in a row, he's able to take this group of versatile, odd characters and group them together and really like create a group that you love watching, that have amazing chemistry, and that really grow to care for one another, just like in Guardians or the Suicide Squad. Hilarious, dark, edgy humor, with the sidekick Vigilante being a huge standout. Great brutal action in there, and great music, of course, and an amazing opening theme. It wasn't perfect. The actual central plot line about the butterfly alien invasion wasn't very, this isn't that engaging. I was always more invested in the characters and spending time with the characters, just hanging out. Or the entire subplot with Peacemaker and his dad that was just so emotional. But overall, another huge win for James Gunn. And yeah, go watch Peacemaker if you haven't already. It's going on the great tier. Next one on here is going to be The Batman movie that finally delivered a classic noir-style detective story. So the central plotline delivers on a great traditional mystery for Batman to solve, and we get to see him working with Gordon, searching around Gotham, and Matt Reeves' version of Gotham City is the definitive movie Gotham for me. A perfectly crafted, dirty, lived-in city full of interesting characters, and the movie perfectly weaves in are like these secondary Batman villains with Colin Farrell's Penguin and Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, who are awesome. And we get Paul Dano's Riddler, great villain with a great unsettling performance. Big departure from the comics, but it works. And then you even have John Turturro in there as Carmine Falcone, which was awesome. And then we have Batman himself. And I love that we get to see this young year two Batman who hasn't developed that Bruce Wayne persona yet. He's just brooding vengeance all of the time. And his subtle character arc of going from just the punisher of criminals to the savior of the people by the end is amazing. And I love just how much time we got with Batman in the suit. And for my money, this is the version of Batman with the greatest screen presence, meaning the suit, the way he moves, the way he sounds, everything involving Matt Reeves' direction and Robert Pattinson's performance was amazing. Maybe it's a little long, maybe it was a little overstuffed, but this is the Batman movie that I had been waiting for a long time, and it absolutely delivered. So for me, it's going on the amazing tier. Moon Knight. A pretty uneven, but overall solid MCU series. Oscar Isaac is fantastic in the lead role, and convincingly plays both Mark and Steven, sometimes at the same time. Ethan Hawke is solid as the villain in there. And the story unfolds in a pretty interesting way, where the things that you thought were real and the things that you thought were fantasy get flipped on their head a little bit. And not to get too deep into spoilers or anything, but every time we go back to the mental hospital stuff, like toward the back half of the show, that was like really intriguing, the best stuff in the show. But the main adventure plot line feels a little too normal, uh, though that's kind of the point. Um, I will say that Asylum, episode 5 of the series, is my favorite singular episode of one of these Disney Plus series thus far. It was wild, it was crazy, while also doing a great job of showing Steven's tragic backstory and everything up to everything leading up to what we'd seen so far. But then immediately after that, we get this finale that just feels rushed. As we go from interesting character-based stuff with Mark and Steven to all of a sudden it's Egyptian gods, Power Rangers fighting. The other flaws in here would be there's barely any Moon Knight in Moon Knight. We spend a lot of time with Mark and Steven, but it's more Indiana Jones relic hunting adventure than it is Moon Knight superhero action. We rarely see the suit, and overall the special effects are really spotty, so it was a mixed bag. And my opinion has actually diminished a lot on it since it first came out, but I enjoyed it quite a bit during its original run, so we're going to throw Moon Knight on the good tier. Next up, Morbius. And, you know, what needs to be said about Morbius that hasn't already been said? It's barely even a movie. There's barely a story in this one. The plot is very straightforward, but it feels like parts are missing. Characters just kind of show up different places from scene to scene, and none of the characters have any life to them. Besides maybe Matt Smith, who seems to be having a little bit of fun in the role. The action is bad. The editing is awful. The effects are horrendous. It's not gory. It doesn't do anything interesting with the title character. And it really only exists to ride the coattails of Spider-Man No Way Home and to trick people into thinking it's going to be important in setting up some kind of shared Sony Spider-Man universe that will most likely never go anywhere. So, might be a hot take to put the most successful film of all time into the terrible tier, but I have to keep it honest. Next one on here is going to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And this is one where I totally get the criticisms. The movie's titled Multiverse of Madness, and we really only spend time in a very limited number of universes, and they're really not that unique or interesting on their own. And, you know, it could have done a little more with that premise, sure, but for me, I'm just happy that we got a Sam Raimi movie inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe that takes much more inspiration from his Evil Dead movies than his other superhero movies. So for the most part, it feels like Sam was allowed to go all out with these crazy sequences and plot elements, and we get more gore and horror elements than we usually do with MCU fare. Give me Doctor Strange possessing a dead Doctor Strange's body, taking control of an army of demons that comes out of him and using them to fly as a cape, and I'm happy. Give me Doctor Strange versus evil Doctor Strange in a music note fight. That's weird. That's hot. That's awesome. I'm happy. On top of that, I think Wanda in this film was one of the best MCU villains up to this point, and I think they gave Doctor Strange a really good character arc that recontextualizes some of the decisions that he's made up to this point in time. And he has to learn that there's not always one option, and that he can't always be in control. There can't always be one solution. The camera movement is much more dynamic in this movie than in any other MCU movie. The action is great, so I get why a lot of people may have been disappointed. For me, Doctor Strange 2 absolutely delivered, so it is going on the good tier. Then we got Miss Marvel, which was not an MCU show that I was particularly excited for. I looked at the trailers and said, it's not for me, too niche. And then the first 2 episodes were surprisingly good. I was invested in Kamala and her family, and I thought having a new character that's a huge fan of the heroes of this universe, just like we are, was a really smart move. And it had a really cool, unique, vibrant presentation, and then it goes off the rails. I was not invested whatsoever in the mythology with her new boyfriend and this group that her ancestors were a part of or something. I don't think any of that was presented in an engaging way, and it felt like we had to pause the small town superhero origin stuff to do this globe-trotting adventure, getting into partition and this mythology, and it didn't really come together at all. Where by the end of the show, you have this whole episode that takes place in 1940s India, and then we have another one of these super rushed finales where it needs to tie in all these unrelated stories. So on top of that, the villains were terrible. CGI and Kamala's powers looked awful. So this was a show that didn't interest me at first, quickly won me over, and then just completely lost it. And I think that this origin story for Kamala would have been better suited for a movie. And that this show demonstrates how Disney just hasn't cracked the code on how to do these 6-episode Marvel miniseries. So Miss Marvel is going to go in the okay tier. Next one on here is going to be Thor, Love, and Thunder. Probably the biggest disappointment of the year for me on this list. There's a few positive elements in here, but they're all wasted. They brought in Christian Bale to play Gore the God Butcher. And while Bale's performance is great, he's underutilized. And we never see him butchering any gods after the first scene. There's all these ideas about gods and power and then the power they possess and fairness that are all super interesting that are completely unexplored because this is a movie that just insists on telling every joke. Taika Waititi just went too far with the jokes in this one. It feels like self-parody. We have this awkward love triangle between Thor and his two hammers. We have screaming goats. And we have this, like, the silliest possible version of, like, Zeus we could have in there. And, yeah, it's too many jokes. It's self-parody. It's not funny most of the time. And it undercuts any dramatic tension that the movie was trying to go for. The Guardians of the Galaxy are in here for about 3 minutes, which was a disappointment after they were featured so heavily in the trailers. Thor's arc is stuff we've already seen his character go through it multiple times. I wasn't really invested in Jane and her story because the movie just can't take anything seriously. Taika was happy to just make up new powers for Thor on the spot and make jokes about genocidal events within this universe. And there's some truly baffling special effects in here. So on my initial review over on Letterboxd, I think I went positive with like a 6, but this is one that I thinking about it now, I just remember the bad stuff. So unfortunately, this one is going to go on the bad tier. Next one on here, She-Hulk. For me, this is one of the MCU's biggest misfires to date. I don't think the central character of She-Hulk was particularly likable. I wasn't interested in exploring her dating life or her job as a lawyer. For me, those just aren't the types of stories I want to see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The central story also, with where it goes toward the end of the series, just feels engineered to make a certain group of people on the internet mad, and then it goes out of its way to call those people out, which is the show acknowledging that they know that they made a show that would rub some people the wrong way. That's just weird. It's a comedy, but it's not funny whatsoever. The fourth wall breaks are awkward. And this has like the one scene in a comic book movie or show from this year, or ever maybe, that just made me the most upset with some of the directions it goes. There are just some things that break the MCU in here with the fourth wall breaks and tone and everything. And the special effects, as we all knew they would be, are horrible. There's a few positives in here. I think they handled Daredevil okay, actually. I think that could have been a lot worse. And I will say, in tone, it is a faithful adaptation of the She-Hulk comics, with fourth wall breaks and a focus on her day-to-day life. And for fans of She-Hulk, I hope they got what they wanted. For me, it just wasn't for me. And it made me mad a lot of the time. So unfortunately, this is one that's going to have to go in the terrible tier. One of my least favorite MCU projects to date. Werewolf by Night. A great Halloween special and a really pleasant surprise. And the directorial debut of composer Michael Giacchino, who has composed tons of great scores and really came through with his like movie debut or TV special. I love the old school monster movie aesthetic and the black and white in this one. The action was great, especially when you get into the third act and our werewolf is just tearing dudes up. It's bloody and the cinematography is awesome. And because it's in black and white, you can get away with a little more of the gore. And I really like Jack, Elsa, and Man-Thing in here. We don't know a ton about them, but I'm really looking forward to seeing more of them in the MCU. And this is what I want to see more of from the MCU on Disney Plus, to be honest. Short form, original, self-contained stories. The only nitpick I might throw in there is that I think it's too short. Doesn't absolutely need to be one of these like 2-hour epics, but I could have used another like 10, 20 minutes to expand on the second act, which felt a little rushed. But other than that, great. So yeah, it's going on the great tier. Really enjoyed that one. Black Adam. Pure dumb fun. The kind of schlocky superhero madness that we just don't get much of nowadays. The story and the storytelling are super simple and straightforward to make way for these larger-than-life characters and crazy action sequences. Black Adam, a Shazam villain, is actually able to hold his own in a solo movie thanks, of course, to The Rock's charisma and screen presence. The Justice Society are a ton of fun in here. I loved seeing Pierce Brosnan in a superhero movie. He's awesome as Dr. Fate. And I love the rivalry and relationship we see between Black Adam and Hawkman. The action sequences are fantastic, where you feel the impact of every punch. The kills are aggressive. The VFX and cinematography are really good. There's lots of slow motion. So it's corny and silly as can be. One-liners galore, over-the-top characters and action. So it's not going to be for everyone, but I had a blast with Black Adam, so it's going on the good tier. They're the one on the good tier. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, an emotional sequel and a loving tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Where you look at the outline of this film, and you can see a lot of like the aspects that were probably in the original Chadwick version. And these are some of the best aspects of the film, where exploring how T'Challa's like decision to open up Wakanda's resources to the rest of the world, seeing how that affects Wakanda, and seeing how this other vibranium nation, Talokan, how they react. It's all very interesting. And we get a fantastic villain in Namor, where it can be charming in one moment, but absolutely menacing in the next. And you have a really fantastic arc for Shuri here. Where the deaths in this movie, after the deaths in this movie, we see her just in this dark place and ready to go down that path of vengeance, just like Killmonger before her. And I thought everything they did with her really, really worked. And Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda delivers some of the best raw acting in the MCU in this movie. The action sequences and the third act are a lot better than those in the first Black Panther. Maybe it's a bit overstuffed again. I wasn't crazy about Ironheart. And every time we cut back to the American CIA stuff, I just wanted to get back to Wakanda. But on the whole, man, this was a movie that was dealt just a terrible hand with, of course, the death of the star and everything. And Ryan Coogler pulled it off and delivered a great Black Panther story and an emotional tribute to their friend. So Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is going on the great tier. Last one to talk about on here, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. It's always fun to spend more time with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's exactly what you get here. It is a fun Christmas premise, and we get to spend more time with Drax and Mantis, who are becoming one of the best duos in the MCU. It's absolutely hilarious, but also manages to be pretty heartfelt by the end. And there's a fun original song in there and all the James Gunn quirkiness you'd expect. And it doesn't feel just like more content for Disney Plus. It's clear that there was a lot of heart put into this one, and it effectively raised my excitement for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 later this year. And this might be the project on this list that left the biggest grin on my face afterwards. So the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special is going on the great tier. And that's it. There's our tier list. Before we wrap up, I'm gonna rank the films real quick. She-Hulk has more value than Morbius, so on the terrible tier. She-Hulk better than Morbius. I think that Moon Knight is probably the weakest entry on the good tier. And while I have less problems with Black Adam for what it is, I think that Multiverse of Madness is definitely a bit better overall. Into the great tier, with our 2 Disney Plus specials, it's a bit tricky because I want to see more in the future. I want to see more original productions like Werewolf by Night. But again, of the 2, obviously, Guardians left me with just a bigger grin on my face afterwards. So I think I'm going to have to go with the Guardians as better. And I loved Peacemaker, and I think it's better than the 2 specials. But I think that what Ryan Coogler and company were able to do with the sequel to Black Panther, after the hand they were dealt, was really fantastic. So that's going to inch that one out above Peacemaker and the 2 specials. So, yeah, there's our ranking of every Marvel and DC movie and show from 2022. From best to worst, we have The Batman, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Peacemaker, The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, Werewolf by Night, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Black Adam, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, Thor Love and Thunder, She-Hulk, and Morbius at the bottom. Thank you so much for watching this first video on the channel. Coming up, I'm going to be doing a ranking and analysis of Disney Animation's year in 2022. And then I'm going to be doing another tier list and ranking of every new movie I saw in 2022. So subscribe if you want to stick around. Give this video a like, share it whenever you need, do whatever you need to do. And I'll see you on the next one.